And tell me a little bit about what organic farms are currently using the seawater, and in what parts of the country, and what differences have they seen? You mentioned yield. Are there any other things that they've given back to you, any other feedback about their growing experience?
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is that, most of our users are not organic farms. And, part of that, I think, is because it's very expensive to be a chemical farmer these days. I mean, you hear it in the news every day, with the oil prices climbing up. Most fertilizers are in some way derivative of oil, or they're very, dependent on oil. So the prices are going through the ceiling. They're always looking for better ways, less expensive ways. But, most boxes and barrels that end up on a farm, have a skull and crossbones on them. Mm-hmm. And, that's got to give you pause, especially if you're handling it and spraying it, and you have to wear a respirator and goggles and gloves. And so, they see that, it doesn't affect them well. It can't be making good food. So mostly our early success was with chemical farmers. And the nice thing is that they can easily transition to being organic farmers, and at the same time, of course, their health gets better. They're not spraying poisons everywhere. And but with organic farming, what you have, people are using manures and worm casings and bacterias and teas of various kinds. But all those things don't restore the minerals. It's again, manure is only as good as the field that the cow ate from.
Exactly.
And if that field,
exactly.
And
it's so amazing to talk about these conventional farms, and it really makes me want to cry, because these conventional farms are, for my training, the cause of a lot of suffering, of course, because of the mineral deficiencies. But I talk to people so much about conventional fruits and vegetables having all of this pesticide residue. Can you talk a little bit about the current state of agribusiness, kind of before seawater entered the picture, in terms of the pesticides and also the fertilizers necessary? Talk about the implication of using NPK.
Well, I just happen to have, I don't know how political we want to get tonight, but
okay. Go for it.
Yeah, okay. I happen to have printed out something from a website called Nutrients for Life, and it's a subset. You'll find a link on the Fertilizer Institute's website, which is, I think, tfi.com or .org. But the point being is that, the NPK was sort of accidentally came about as the agricultural norm, if you will, because there was a lot of it in excess after the war, because it also happens to be used for munitions.
Amazing.
But, it doesn't grow good food, but I have to read you this paragraph. Let me just get to where I can read it. What they did is they sponsored a professorship. And let me just read it to you. It is our hope that this professorship will encourage the expansion of untapped and important area in academic research, said the director. If, as predicted, a correlation between fertilizer and healthier foods is established, imagine the impact. An increasingly health-conscious public will finally regard fertilizers for what they truly are, nutritious. It's just incredible, because, and this brings me back to the story I wanted to tell you about Dr. Murray.
Oh, perfect.
And what he used to do, in fact, he did this at a keynote convention in, I think, 1976 in St. Louis, which is where it's going to be this year again. It hasn't been there in a while. But he started out the lecture just by, show of hands, how many of you are farmers? And of course that means mostly everybody at this particular show. And then he would ask, and there would be several hundred people in the audience, and he'd ask them, what is your core business? And, one farmer would say, well, I raise cattle and that's what I do. And another one would say, well, I raise corn and soybeans and that's what I do. And he'd do that for about 10 minutes, get all kinds of answers. And then he'd stop them and he'd say, that's not your business. What your business is you're a strip miner. But instead of dynamite, you use seeds to break the minerals from their holding matrix. And then you ship those products, whether it be beef or corn or soybeans or oats, you ship them to market, and that's what you do. You're a strip miner. You strip the minerals out of the soil, and you ship them away.
He saw the world as this amazing exchange. He saw the world as this amazing exchange of minerals. It's incredible.
Yeah. And what they put back are three things: nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that eventually the food's not going to have any value.
Exactly.
And so then you have to think about, well, okay, if all those elements were there in the soil before we first tilled it, how do you put them back? What proportion? I mean, how do you, where's the roadmap? It's hopeless. But the nice thing is that, if you look at, the chlorophyll makeup, which is the blood of the plant, in places where they've never tilled the soil, it has almost an identical makeup, proportion, and order as seawater. And, we've already talked about human blood being quarter-strength seawater. Dr. Rene Quintone did a lot of experiments in the early 30s, and you'll find this on the web, too. He drained most of the blood out of a dog, and I'm sorry, you PETA fans, but the good news is he replaced it with clean, dilute seawater, and in half an hour the dog was running around and perfectly healthy.
Because these elements that make up the plasma or make up the blood are so similar, have such similarity to seawater, essentially.
Yep.